Hey there, learning community. It's Dr. Deanna, and today I'm going to answer a question that I get a lot, and that is, how do I know where my child is in their reading? So, in order to help your child grow and progress in their reading, we have to know where they are in their reading, and that requires something called assessment. And that term is not a favorite. I know a lot of us come to the table carrying emotions that go along with testing or assessments. So today I want to encourage a mind shift and for us to change our perspective a little bit. So I'm going to share with you some strategies and some tips that you can take right back into your home setting, or even if you're a teacher, your classroom setting. So I used to think that assessment had to be super formal. And the reality is that it doesn't. Assessment can be observational. It certainly can be formal, but there are a lot of different ways to go about it. And so I'm going to share with you 3 different ways. And you can use these strategies as they suit you in your homeschool setting. So the first mind shift that I'm going to encourage you to have is to think outside of grade level boxes. And we connect so often reading skills to a grade level. And that has to do with the developmental process of reading, which is an entirely different episode. And I do actually have some episodes that cover that, and I plan to cover it more in depth. But I want us to think outside those grade level boxes and actually shift our perspective and our mindset to focusing on skill sets rather than grade level. So instead of saying our child is reading at such and such grade level, I want us to stop for a moment and for these purposes, think about skill sets, because at the end of the day, if your child is 9 and they're struggling with vowel teams, for instance, like, they're just having trouble with the OA or that the IE can say different sounds, it really doesn't matter where they were supposed to learn that. What matters is that we find out the areas they need help and then help them in them. Because what's our why? Our why is to create confident and capable readers that can navigate literacy and navigate the world by being able to read and interpret text. And in order to do that, they need to be able to read fluently. And in order to read fluently, we need to build a strong phonics foundation. So that's the first thing I want to challenge you to change a bit. If you've been thinking of reading as only connected to a grade level type system, let's think outside that for just a little bit and focus on some skill sets. So the next thing I'm going to encourage us to shift a bit is the way that we approach assessment. And I promised you that I was going to give you some strategies that were both a bit formal, but also relaxed ways, observational ways that we can assess our child. So when we approach assessment, we should approach assessment really focusing on the purpose behind it. And the purpose of assessment is to really inform our teaching and help us to know how we can help our child. We also should be aware of how we come to the testing experience and the things that we've experienced in our life. So the word assessment or test, quiz, it can bring up a lot of emotions. A lot of us had some negative experiences. And for our children, if they were in the school setting, and of course this isn't always the case, but if they had some negative experiences, that may still be carried with them. And so the one thing that I really encourage you to do before you start testing is just to let your child know, reassure them that this is not anything that will get them in trouble. If they don't know something, they're not going to be in trouble. This is only to let you know how you can help them. You need to know what they know so you can help them. And that changes the dynamic of the assessment process, and it changes the purpose of it. So no longer is it something where children feel that they're going to, get zapped, or feel bad if they don't know something. It's perfectly okay if they don't know something. We just want to know what they don't know so we can help them. So the first method of assessment is going to be the most formal of the three that I share with you today. But again, it doesn't need to be super formal. It can be as relaxed, because at the end of the day, we want to have authentic insight into what our children know. So this is something I call a quick check. And a quick check is when I use a short little assessment to get an idea of how a child is performing in a specific skill. So for phonics, I would give them a list, and I have an example here, a list that covers a particular skill. I would focus on how they do in reading those words. Is it choppy? Are they able to blend them? The rule of thumb is if they miss about 3 words or 2 words, I would stick with 3 in a row, then you're going to go ahead and stop the assessment, because that's showing that it may be a little bit outside their range. And we're not going for frustration for either parent or child. And so that was a rule of thumb I used both in the homeschool setting and the classroom setting, is if a child missed about 3 in a row, then that just meant that it was time to take a step back. I would make a note. And one thing I recommend is, and I showed a list here, is if you make a copy of that list for yourself so you can be making notes as the child is reading. So if they struggle with that middle vowel, you can really focus on middle vowels, and you can make a little notation. You can circle the words that they have a little bit of a challenge with. So having that right in front of you is super helpful and less distracting than making marks on the paper that the child is reading off of. That's something that I also discourage, because you want them to focus without thinking, oh, I messed up. Because sometimes you could be making a positive note and they're not really going to be interpreting that in that way. So it's best to just have your own little set of papers that you can make notations on, however you want to do that. I also have a phonics and reading skills checklist available for free on my Teacher Pay Teachers storefront. And so I will be putting the link for that in the description box below. You can check that out along with all the other activities that I've designed in order to give children play-based and hands-on practice. But in any case, so when we do this type of assessment for reading, sometimes we use a list of words that are real words, and we also sometimes use something called nonsense words. And the reason we might choose to do nonsense words is because we want to see what a child does with phonics when it's not necessarily a word that they've encountered, because it's not really even a real word. We're seeing how they approach something new and never seen before with their phonics knowledge. So that would be the purpose behind a nonsense list, but you can do either or. A list of words is also, despite the fact that it's not authentic reading per se, it also gives us insight into how children are using phonics when they're reading words and not able to use the context of a sentence. Although using context of a sentence can be helpful and a skill, we also want to see purely how they are using their phonics knowledge to decode words. I also have this book. I personally use this book. It's a fantastic book. I highly recommend it. I don't get any commission on this, but I so recommend this book. I will put the link down below. Again, it's nothing that I will get paid on if you buy this or go look into it. However, I do want to share this resource with families because it is super helpful, and there are word lists for each phonics skills and a little cheat sheet at the end of the book that explains phonics rules, even the trickier ones. So that can be very, very helpful for parents as they are working with children at home. So the first one that is less formal, so our actual second strategy, is to look at their spelling. And the reason why we look at spelling to see phonics knowledge is because spelling is actual application of what they know about phonics. And they are applying it at a higher level than if they are just regurgitating information. So in education, we have something called Webb's depth of knowledge. And this basically is just scaffolding or gives a hierarchy of lesser forms of knowing something versus higher level forms of knowing something. For example, just memorizing something like, for instance, people memorizing frequency words is a lesser form of knowing something rather than the application of it, such as being able to apply a spelling or phonics rule to a word that you have not encountered before. That's the application. And so if you look at a child's spelling, you will get a great insight into what phonics skills they actually know, have absorbed, and are using on their own. Now, we have something in teaching, especially when you work with littles, and we call it invented spelling. I love inventees. That's what I call it. It's super fun, but I also love it because it helps me to see what a child knows and is applying to their spelling, because that means that most likely if they're able to apply it to their spelling, they're also applying it to their reading. One thing to keep in mind is we typically only are looking for the phonics skills that the child has been introduced to. So we're not looking to zap them on every spelling error. In fact, we're not zapping at all. Invented spelling is a very natural and normal part of the literacy journey. And we want to encourage children to feel comfortable and safe when they're writing and spelling and not to over worry. But I have a couple examples here, so I want to share them with you. The first one is actually an example of my own boys from when they were younger. And you can see we were doing activity with El Conan boxes. And if I were looking at this today, which at the time when I looked at this, I could see that they were confusing the H brothers. So that would be a little note to self. All right, we're going to work a little bit more on our H brothers because we definitely had worked on them. But while they could hear an H brother in that word at the end, they were not applying it correctly, which is okay. Again, it's part of the normal process of literacy development. But it was definitely a note to self that, okay, we're going to work on this. So in any case, spelling is a great strategy. Here's another example of invented spelling. So we see this one says, I love my dog. And they have used the phonetic spelling and not the conventional spelling for the word love. So we could make a little note of that. That might be a heart word that we go back and review if we've already learned it. And there are phonics involved in the word love. So we definitely want to share that with children so they can analyze and apply those phonics. That's really something new that's come out when it's come to when it goes to talking about frequency words and sight words. We really do encourage work on phonics. But in any case, the next line says, he is fuzzy. And in this case, we see they know that E-twin, that vowel team, the two E's, saying E, which is great. They're not applying it correctly. Maybe we haven't done the Y as a long E at the end of a word. So that's okay. But it's a little note to self, all right, they're not applying that Y at the end of a word. And if we've covered that already with the child, we make a little note. All right, we're going to go back and work on that skill again. And the next line says, his name is Max. And in this case, we can see some really great things. First of all, he's capitalizing the name Max with an uppercase M. That's some great application right there in conventions and grammar of writing. But we also see that name has been misspelled and they've omitted the silent E at the end, which would be another opportunity to make a little note to self. All right, we need to go back and we need to work on that spelling pattern with the silent E, helping the vowels say their long name. So that is the second way that I recommend assessing your child's phonics knowledge, because if they're applying it to their spelling, they most likely are able to consistently apply it to their reading. Last strategy or method for assessing where your child is with their reading is to have them actually read a decodable text. And by decodable, I mean one that has phonics and heart words that they have learned and been taught, so you know that they should be able to do these phonics. So if you've covered the silent E, you want to have a decodable text that has some of those types of words in it. If they've only done CVC words, which is those 3 sound words with the short vowel in the middle, then you want to stick to a text that has those words. So you want to pick a text that is decodable. So taking a decodable text that has words that your child should be able to decode based upon the phonics skills that you've worked on is the way to go for this strategy. And just listening to them read, you can keep the checklist that I have on my TPT storefront right next to you, make notations as they read. And in addition to focusing on phonics skills and which phonics skills that they're applying, the really great thing about this strategy is that you can also see how they're doing in their fluency. Are they reading smoothly? Are they reading with expression? And part of that is also being able to note, are they paying attention to punctuation? Like when they come to the period in the sentence, do they pause? Are they able to attend to exclamation points and read that with a little bit of emotion? So those are really great things to look for as well. And I have given a spot on the checklist to notate that too. So there is a great video out that I just released last week about how to work on fluency. So if you start to notice some of those challenges, that's going to be something you definitely want to check out. And with that, I look forward to seeing you next time when I teach to your super learning strengths, one child and family at a time.